The pound for pound top fighter in boxing right now is Terence Crawford. To be honest, Terence Crawford, I just truly believe he doesn't have to be under my company for me to give a guy props. I'm not like that. Raw talent, hell of a fighter. He's a mother, and he reminds me of a young Floyd Mayweather. You know, he can fight his ass off, and that's what I like about him.
I think Terence Crawford right now in the sport of boxing is the pound for pound best fighter in the sport of boxing right now. It's good to see him in his position, in the position that he's in.
This is the MJ of boxing, Floyd Mayweather, nearly a decade ago, and now still stating the same thing, which is Terence Bud Crawford is the undisputed pound-for-pound king. What's interesting is when Floyd Mayweather fought, there was no question back then to who was the pound-for-pound number one king. They tried to squeeze Pacquiao in there, but that was a short run, and even then, Floyd was still the pound-for-pound number one king. There was no debate about it. Just like when Roy Jones fought, there was no debate to who was the pound-for-pound number one king. Till Roy aged and got dethroned, then Floyd Mayweather picked up the torch. Floyd was so great. He kept one of the greatest fighters of all time under his shadow. Andre Ward didn't have a chance to become pound-for-pound number one until Floyd retired. That's when Andre Ward became pound-for-pound number one. And then as soon as Ward retired, Crawford picked up the torch. Therefore, the timeline of the pound-for-pound kings from the 1990s, and even before that, until today, was Roy Jones, who passed the torch to Floyd, who passed the torch to Andre Ward, who passed the torch to Terence Bud Crawford. And Terence Bud Crawford, just like Floyd, was the pound-for-pound number one without any debate all this time. However, old media tried to break up the passing of the torch by the fighters on the coincidental list with politics, since they were not trying to live through another 2 decades of another fighter just like Floyd from the coincidental list whipping on their favorite fighters. Therefore, old media created the New Hope Order by pushing the agenda and creating the narrative that the best fighter in the world is a fighter from the Hope list. The way they decided to go about it is even if the fighter from the Hope list loses, they're going to replace him with another fighter from the Hope list and give him the crown for the pound-for-pound king, for the best fighter in the world. Basically, they changed the criteria to being the best fighter in the world to being the most liked fighter in the world, to being the fighter that they like instead of who is truly the best. The people who established the New Hope Order are the wizards of old media, the leaders of the race fans. Their agenda is simple. If you are a fighter on the coincidental list, then you are disqualified to be the pound-for-pound king in the sport of boxing, even if you overqualify. Your complexion for the neglection disqualifies you automatically. And that's what happened to Bud and Andre Ward. But if you are a fighter on the Hope list, then you qualify to be the pound-for-pound number one, even if you are not, even if you don't qualify. As long as you have the complexion for the connection to get the Hope's protection. And that's exactly what they did for the past decade since Floyd retired. Remember, when Floyd retired, there was no question to who was the pound-for-pound number one. Andre Ward was number one and Crawford was number two. But guess what? Old media gave the crown to Roman Gonzalez, a fighter back then we didn't even know who he was. And his reign was short-ran because he ended up getting KO'd. As soon as he did, they replaced him with Kovalev. Then, as soon as Kovalev got knocked out by Andre Ward, they replaced him with Gennady Golovkin. As soon as Gennady Golovkin lost and got exposed, they replaced him with Lomachenko. They even erased Lomachenko's loss on more than one occasion in order to justify why he was pound for pound number one over Bud Crawford back then. Ironically though, as soon as Lomachenko ended up losing, instead of placing the guy who they had ranked as number 1B, Terrence Bud Crawford, behind number 1A Lomachenko, they ended up putting Canelo Alvarez as the number one pound for pound over Crawford, who was below Crawford on their list. Remember, that's what they have been doing this entire time since Roman Gonzalez. Anyways, Canelo Alvarez ended up losing. Canelo lost every round to Bivol. And instead of placing Crawford as number one finally, they ended up finding Inoue out of nowhere and placing him there instead. They also did the same thing to Usyk. What's crazy is I told you guys this was going to happen. I'm not a prophet, but I told you guys they were going to try to replace Crawford with Inoue and Usyk after Canelo loses. And that's exactly what ended up happening. How did I know that? It's because I already knew about the New Hope order by old media. After that, though, the crazy part about it all is the fact that they had Errol Spence as top 3 pound for pound on all of their lists. And when Crawford fought him, Crawford was arguably number 1. Even according to them, he was number 2, number 3. So 2 top 3 pound for pound fighters fought each other in a fight that's supposed to be Hagler-Hearn. Crawford beat Errol Spence in the ass whipping of the century, respectfully. Even then, they still disrespect Crawford till this day by not putting him as the pound for pound king. I mean, Usyk went life and death with Hunter. He barely beat Tyson Fury. And he also struggled with Anthony Joshua. Meanwhile, Crawford is smoking his competition, fighters that are better than Usyk competition, fighters that are higher on the pound for pound list than Usyk competition. Likewise for Inoue, I don't even know who Inoue is fighting next. And no one knows who he fought before that. And no one knows who he fought before that. Meanwhile, he got real fighters that he can fight at 126 or even at 118 that can move up and fight him. At 122, at the very least, fight MJ and move on. But this man is too busy cherry picking while old media is keeping their mouth shut. While the race fans are acting as if this guy is fighting monsters when he's fighting cherries. That's why no one even talks about his fights. That's why when Inoue fights, literally the next hour, people already moved on. No one is talking about him no more because he's the king of cherry picking. However, some way, somehow, these are the fighters that old media are placing over Crawford on the pound for pound list. Crawford is knocking out his rivals, while Usyk is struggling with them. Inoue struggled with a 39 years old Donaire. The only good name on Inoue's resume is Fulton. That's it, that's all. Meanwhile, Crawford knocked out Errol Spence, Sean Porter, Benavidez, Mean Machine, Jeff Horn, Amir Khan, Gamboa, beat Postal, knocked out Flex Diaz, and the list goes on and on and on. So while Inoue is trying to find his next cherry-picking victim, fighting a nobody in Las Vegas, Crawford, on the other hand, is moving up pretty much 3 weight classes to fight Canelo Alvarez. You guys know what will be equivalent of that is Inoue moving up to fight Gervonta at 135, or Keyshawn, or Shakur. Inoue said he will never do that because he's simply not as great as Crawford. He can't even imagine doing what Crawford is actually doing. But they have Inoue and Usyk on the pound for pound list over Crawford. We all know why. New Hope order. The crazy part about it all is all the fighters that old media have over Crawford on the pound for pound list, all of them said and still say till this day that Crawford is the pound for pound king. Inoue said, "I'm not the pound for pound king. Crawford is." Usyk said, "I'm not the pound for pound king. Crawford is." Bivol said, "The number one pound for pound is Crawford." Beterbiev said the same thing. "The number one pound for pound is Crawford." Devin Haney said the same thing. Shakur. And all the fighters said the pound for pound king is Crawford. However, old media, despite the past greats from Mike Tyson, Roy Jones to Floyd, to the new greats or potential greats from Usyk to Inoue to Bivol to Beterbiev to Devin Haney, all stating that Crawford is pound for pound number one. Meanwhile, the people that don't know shit about boxing, word to Roger Mayweather, old media that is, due to being racially biased, they refuse to put a black fighter as the pound for pound number one king, simply because that doesn't fit the New Hope agenda. Old media want to stop the cycle of the fighters on the coincidental list being the pound for pound kings, from the Jack Johnson days to the Joe Louis days, to the Sugar Ray Robinson days, to the Muhammad Ali days, to the Sugar Ray Leonard days, to the Sweet Pea Whitaker days, to the Roy Jones days, to the Floyd, to the Andre Ward, to the Crawford days. Until this day, they want to break the cycle. But the bad news is, boxing breed greats. Only from the fighters on the coincidental list in the sport of boxing, hate it or love it. If you look at 99% of all the fighters in boxing, they all lost to a fighter on the coincidental list, especially when they were undefeated for the most part. That's the whole absolute truth. And they preying on Crawford's downfall, because if he moves up to beat Canelo, he will actually destroy the New Hope order, because all that work that they did to bury his accomplishments will be brought to light. I mean, look at the new school fighters. From which race would you say the next pound for pound king will come? It don't take a genius to figure that out. I mean, which race has the best champions on the come up or the best prospects? Well, I'm going to start. Abdullah Mason, Kermel Moulton, Keyshawn Davis. Now your turn. Name me fighters from another race that can compete with that. With the opinions out of the door and the facts laid out on the table, go ahead and drop your thoughts on the New Hope order by old media. Subscribe below, and to be continued on the next episode of Akhi, Akhi TV. Peace out. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.